Hello everybody and welcome back to Setting the Scene, episode 5. I'm your host David. Now it's really great to be back filming Setting the Scene. We had a break last week. I was just absolutely swamped with lots of stuff and just couldn't find the time to film the 3 series here. So I did an army showcase, or army focus rather, in the end, just to help bridge that gap for content last week. So hopefully that was okay for you. I know I got quite deep into the Mechanicum, but you know, when something is so passionate and so close to you, it's hard not to kind of share the story to it. So I wanted it to be a little bit different rather than just talking about Thalax and Crass Venators and Tauros armor conveyors and stuff. So hopefully you found it interesting. This week, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to look at building a very, very generic board. And you'll notice that I'm standing rather than sitting this time. I found that sitting down was just a bit of a pain, so I wasn't able to lift the bits in place and look over what I was doing. So I've moved everything around now and I'm standing, so hopefully you're okay with that. You'll also notice that my hair has gotten shorter. The girlfriend got her way. I say got away, that sounds really silly. I asked her to cut my hair for me because it was just driving me crazy. It's getting so hot and it's a little bit short at the moment, but hopefully we'll get to the barbers soon for them to trim it up and make it look a little bit nicer. So I'm a lot cooler, which is great news. All right, so as I said, I'm going to build a really generic board, and this will serve a purpose for 30k and Adeptus Titanicus. I will be doing some Adeptus Titanicus boards, but they're a couple of weeks away. I've got a few things I want to do for 30k first before I move on to AT. With that said, this is probably going to be the shortest Setting the Scene ever, because I want to show you that simplicity doesn't mean it's going to be really bad. It just, for me, just proves how really quick and easy these board builds can be, and you can get some fantastic results. The board I'm going to be building is a Mars themed board. You know, Mars features so much in the 30k surroundings that we set ourselves in. So I thought it'd be great to do a Mars themed type board. And the way we achieve that is with sand. Now, sand isn't the most ideal product, particularly if you're at home, you don't want sand all over your kitchen table or in your garage. It's a massive pain, gets all over your models and can scratch your models. However, having said that, if you look after your models and the way you build your scene, you'll have no issue. And I'm not using the smaller squares this time, or the oblong piece, because this bit just commands a little bit more space. So we're back on the 6x4 and we'll get on with it. So we're going to start with these 2 rocks. Now these are huge, super heavy bits of rock, and the reason why I've put them in place right now is because you didn't want to see me struggling to lift them from the floor onto the table here. So I've already set them in place, and what we're trying to achieve from this board is we're trying to achieve some drama and some height into the board. A lot of the terrain I see, the only height generally comes from buildings, and that's great, but they can look a little bit boring. It's really nice to introduce these really big solid lumps of rock to create a bit of a relief in your battlefield. And I can well imagine this piece being right in the center of a 6x4 or a 4x4 if you're building it for AT, and it's something that your Titans or your models have to negotiate. Stuff can come up over the top, mainly infantry, jump pack or jet pack, but stuff can definitely go through the middle, and I'll show you that in a second. But if you're not intending to use it for a board for a game, you can of course set your scene and take some amazing photos. So this will serve 2 purposes. What I've done then, these rocks, I've put them in place, I've put them in an interesting angle, and I really wanted a bit of drama here. I wanted stuff to go under. It's very rare that you see boards where stuff can fit under. You occasionally see like a highway almost. We've got like concrete pillars and then like a highway, but they generally tend to be too high, and putting models on here and interacting with stuff at the bottom, it just doesn't work in my opinion. There are some archways and stuff I've seen. Games Workshop's new range of terrain is really good. It comes with an arch section, and you can fit a whole Leviathan in the center of that arch. It looks really cool. If I can find the picture I saw on Instagram, I'll pop it up with the person's Instagram account. I think it's a guy in New Zealand that did it. It's Alpha Legion. It looks really, really cool. Anyway, so I wanted a little bit of drama, a little bit of height, and to maneuver around this terrain piece will take a little bit of planning. So what I've done is I've just propped it up a little bit You can see these rocks under here that I've got. Now these are aquarium rocks, and they're about £1.20 or £1.19. I think I paid for each one. And they come in different various shapes and sizes. They're not quite the same colour, but we're going to hide them with the sand, so we're not worried about it. So they're just a filler really to thrust this piece up into the air to create a little bit of drama. And then what I've done is I've got a few extra pieces, and I'm just going to pack around the rock to make it sure it's secure, because if one of these rocks falls on your models, it's game over. So we make sure it's nice and solid, it's not going anywhere. This one probably don't need it. Yeah, don't need it. So I'm going to bung this one out of the way. And that's it really. The key thing when building stuff like this out of rocks is to make sure that they actually work in your battlefields. So we need to make sure a vehicle can go through there. Now what we want to do as well is we want to make sure that the real big stuff, so like the Glaives and the Spartans and the Typhons, can't access this piece, because such big vehicles like super heavies or knights, for example, they already have great height if it's a knight, or if it's a super heavy tank, for example, they've got tons of range and lots of options. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to minimize the sheer devastation that those super heavy vehicles can have on the game. So it pays to be a small tank, it pays to be a jet bike, or it pays to be a land speeder, a javelin rather, to use the advantage to you, use the terrain to your advantage, and get in a brilliant position to take out that super heavy or that knight. So for me, you know, battlefields are so important, and the way they're built can really help dictate how a game goes. And if you don't make the best chance or advantage of the terrain, then it's not going to go well. So it's really important for me that you can't fit anything larger than maybe a Sakharin chassis through there, which creates an interesting terrain relief on your board. You know, and if we look at modern day battlefields, there were choke points where larger elements of a battalion or a fighting force weren't able to access, and smaller, lighter armed armies had the advantage over much heavily armed and much more armored columns, for example. So this is a really great way of kind of introducing that, and you can also use this as part of a really heavily narrative game. So you could pit some elite troopers, you know, with lots of special weapons, or lots of TAC Marines with crack grenades or melter bombs or whatever upgrades they can take, against an armoured column. And this would be a great way to make a balanced game, but using two dramatically different forces. Because generally, if an armoured column goes up against tons of infantry, the armoured column can just sit at the back of the board and just fire the hell out of the infantry, and it's not much of a fun game. But when you start introducing these really interesting and technical terrain pieces for the two forces to fight over, that's where the odds can level out. All right, enough. So what I've done, I've created a lot more height. This would normally sit flat on the board, and this top section would be sort of here, which is no good to us. So I've propped it up to make sure we can get stuff under. Now we can test that very quickly, and I conveniently have a Venator, so we can make sure that the Venator can fit under. And already, if you take a photo from there, that looks really cool. So we'll get rid of the Venator, and I have Dan's falchion here. Now that falchion, although you can fit the front section too, is not going in there, which is good. And this is what we want to do. We want to limit what access the super heavy vehicles have around the battlefield. And then finally, just another piece, just another vehicle. My trusty Kronos Venator, as we're on Mars, will easily fit through there. Okay. So we're happy that the board works for us. If we weren't happy with it, we'd just inch this one over just to close that gap up a little bit. But we're going to leave it like that. And the reason why I've put this on a bit of an angle, because I could put it that way, you make a very specific entrance, but I think for this purpose, I think it looks a little bit better on a jaunty angle. So that's what we've gone for. And that's it, other than my sand. I've got loads of material down here, so I'm going to grab some rocks first of all. Now, you've seen me do this before. I'm just going to place these in some random places just to create a bit of relief on the board. That's a bit too big. And these will be covered by the sand, and we're just trying to create a bit of undulation in the battlefield. So we'll just bump that out a little bit more, and then a little bit there, I think. We're not going to need too much. We just want to make this a little bit interesting. Next, we're going to move on to the sand. I've got a big bucket of sand here. And all I'm going to do is just start to dump the sand all over this board here. So what we're aiming to do is we're aiming to cover up these rocks I've just put down. You could leave a couple of them poking through because they are grey, and the majority of these rocks are grey, but they've got a bit of an orange tinge to them, which I think works really well for a Mechanicum board. And we just need to push that into there to cover those rocks up. The sand, I will admit, is perfect scale for both Adeptus Titanicus and 30k. It works really, really well. Looks very cool. Just going to dump a load in here. Yes, sand is a pain to clean up. A lot of people have asked how I clean the boards afterwards. Just dustpan and brush is all I do. Don't chuck it. It's always recyclable. And if there's different grades of aggregate which I use mixed in, I've got various sieves which I use just to sieve the material out. So this is where we get stuck in with our hands. Make sure this is all under there, which it is. Looks good. You know, we're having to feather it out now because we're on a flat surface here now. We're not in the confines of a square or oblong box, like a little sandbox. So we're just making it look good. And this is really where you can kind of accentuate the lines of the rocks. So like the sand would blow in against the rocks and then fall down. So you can start quite high with the sand and get a bit of a natural flow. So I'm going to move it out because the tank fitted perfectly, but now because we've got that kind of burr in there, we need to move it back a little bit so we can get our tanks in and out of it. So that's much better. Let's cover up the black. And the good thing about this sand is it's not just really tiny little particles of sand. There are some much larger little bits of rock and stone in there as well, which is great. So it just creates some alternative texture on the board. You know, I can well imagine if you're a Star Wars fan, you know, we were on Tatooine, I guess, and all the... I'm not very good at Star Wars references, but I've watched the movies. I really enjoy them, but I'm not a massive fan of the franchise. But they are very cool, particularly the 4, 5, and 6 in particular. But you know, you can just imagine that we're on Tatooine, and you've got a column of Jawas. I think it's Jawas, the little dudes with their hats, and they've got the big sandcrawler thing. You know, just winging through here. You know, it can really set some awesome scenes up. You know, a lot of you might play Space Marine Legions as well. That's a really cool game. I'm quite interested in that. The models look fantastic, really good scale, really well detailed, and it will be something different to collect and paint. I don't think the channel's quite there yet to cover those games, but personally, it might be worth just picking up some models and having a quick go with it. It might be quite cool. I mean, that's it. I mean, I'm not trying to make it so easy, but probably just a bit here in case we take a wider shot of the photos, just to kind of make sure we've got everything. Yeah, done. Happy with that. I've got here in my hand, I'm not sure if, I'm not going to convince if this is going to work 100%, but we've got some larger sort of particles of aquarium aggregate, I guess it's called, and this could add a bit of texture. No, it doesn't work. I was going to see if it made some different textures, but it doesn't work. It looks silly. So we've made the decision on that. What we could do is some of the grey slate that I've got that's chopped up into tiny pieces, we could just liberally put it throughout the board. Oh, I'm back. Sorry, I dropped my radio mic on the floor. Sorry about that. So I was saying, you can. I could have used some of the little grey slate pieces just to put them around the board, just make it a little bit more interesting. But they're somewhere in the garage. Had a massive tidy up, and I've tidied up, but I still can't find them. So terrible organisation on my part. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some of these larger pieces and just leave them sticking out. That's probably a bit too big. I think that works really well. You know, I would have put a load under here if I'd managed to find my bits. That works. You know, the beauty about building boards like this is that you can add and take away as much as you need to, which is great. And so, you know, you haven't got to commit to filing all that polystyrene down and setting that rock in place, and then your board is set until you throw the board away, or you sell it, or you give it away, or whatever. So at least with this, you've got a different board every single day, or every single time you can bother to do it, because I know it's a bit of a pain and quite time consuming. For me, that board is finished. For me, it looks really good. There's some really great drama here. You know, I've got some models here. I've got a Thalax, conveniently. I'm going to dip his base in some sand. You know, I can well imagine a squad of Thalax moving up to the building, moving up to the rock, running or using their thrust move to get on top to a prime position. You know, and let's say we've got a Imperial Fist Venator there advancing through the ruin, and the Thalax with his multi-melt is set in a prime position to fire down onto the hull, or as the tank advances through to get a nice rear armoured shot. And that's a cool photo as well, you know, we can get that. You know, the other option is we can take the Sicaran away, and now we've got elements of a Mechanicum force moving through Mars. Let's get some more Thalax on here. Put some stuff on their bases. The beauty with these big rocks is that they have natural kind of layers in them, and it just creates some different height for them as well, rather than all being on the first floor of a building, second floor of a building, or all flat, or maybe on a crater. At least with this, they're all at different heights, which for a photo, if you're using this to take a photo, is really interesting. Got another multi-melter here. Let's do that. Cool. I'm going to pop him there, and now I've got a few Cyber Ocularis, which we'll put in the foreground here. We'll try and bury these in a little bit just for our photo, just to make it look interesting. You know, they're scouted forward, haven't they? Give that -1 cover save to enemy units. Then combined with the Jin Skyne, so it's a -3 to enemy cover saves, which is fantastic. Obviously, if the enemy's within 12 inches of the Cyber Ocularis there. I'm just going to pop these down for a second. So I think that looks pretty cool. You've got this tank advancing through, supported by the Thalax, whilst the Cyber Ocularis are going ahead of the main force. And I think as a photo, that works really, really well. Equally, we can switch it up. We can get some other models involved. We'll get some Adeptus Titanicus. And I think this is the power of using sand and rocks, because it can be scaled any way you like. So we'll just get rid of these. Nice gentle shake and it gets rid of them. Porphyron. Advancing through. Bum. I think that looks great. What else have we got? We've got a Reaver Titan. Popping out the back here. Just put a little bit of sand over his base. Oh, just... Again, looks really cool. Looks really dramatic. This massive Titan is walking through terrain that's so much bigger than he is. You know, and if you've been to the Grand Canyon, which I haven't, but I would love to visit. If you've been to the Grand Canyon, you'll know that those rocks are absolutely massive. And I think it's really hard to bring that scale into our games. And if you can buy a rock from a garden centre for £3.50 or £7, whatever these ones were, it's just great. And you've automatically created a really unique battlefield. I've got a Warbringer here. Now, if you want to block line of sight, hopefully you can see that. That's perfect, you know. And that piece of terrain costs you £3 or £4, £5, £7, whatever it costs. I can't quite remember. The smaller ones I think are £3.50. These larger ones are like £7. So that's great. Get rid of the old Reaver Titan there. Warbringer. He's just slightly too tall. So, you know, you can have a rule with your friend that you're playing that, you know, Warlords or Warbringers or anything bigger cannot physically fit through. They can't, so they've either got to go round, which then makes for a really interesting game, doesn't it? So you could put the larger elements at the back, and if you appreciate Malalax was against Mortis here, then they've got You've got some restricted fire lanes, and then the advantage goes to the knights. And there's some really great boards you could build. You could almost build like a Zone Mortalis-esque type board with lots of rocks and only certain pathways through. That could be quite cool. So you could have a knight-on-knight battle. I know there's some rules in Adeptus Titanicus for monster, like a monster hunt. I mean, that would be really cool. You can have like some sort of sandworm type creature. I don't know if there's rules for that. I know there's from like big clawy beasts and various bits and bobs, but you know, you could again have like a Zone Mortalis style board with maybe 3 or 4 entrances that lead like to a central nest, and the knights have got to wing their way through and take out the nest or take out the sandworms or whatever narrative story you want to come up with. The only minor point that's worth talking about with the sand, now when you put tracked vehicles through, it does leave tracks where they are, which is really, really cool. It looks great. But if you're moving models through, like Thalax, when we film for the channel, they leave circular marks, which is a massive pain. So what I have to do most of the time when I'm filming games on the channel, so I have to go through with my fingers and just, you know, if you're playing at home with a friend, that's not important to you. But if you're filming games for a battle report or for photos, you want to make sure that you fluff the board correctly. And the best fluffing device, not trying to be intentionally rude, is a sieve. If we get a bit of sand, just a tiny bit, pop it in the sieve, and if you sieve it over the top, I appreciate this isn't the best thing to do during games, but as part of your set building before you take photos, for example, it just creates a really beautiful layer of sand and covers up all those imperfections. And then you're generally left with some little rocky bits in here. Get your hand out and then you can just sprinkle them, and that just creates some additional texture. I mean, that was like 2 teaspoons full, and you can just see it just really sets the scene there. It looks absolutely fantastic. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a ton of photos with both Adeptus Titanicus and the Imperial Fist and the Mechanicum, and I'll put them at the end of this video with lots of music, and you can have a look at those photos. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If I've inspired you to build your own setting the scene with your own models, please put it up on your social media and tag the channel in. I'd love to see how you got on with it. We can have a chat about that. And as always, you know, the channel's on Instagram or Facebook, so please ping me a message, David at the 30k channel, if you've got any questions or comments. I would love to talk to you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.